Today I'm going to be working on my paper mache cupcake candy dishes. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for working with paper mache clay and show you my process for sculpting the faces for my paper mache cupcake candy dishes. If you want to see more paper clay sculpting videos, please click subscribe and you'll be notified every time I post a new video. The first step in the process is making the paper mache clay. The product I like to use is called Celluclay. Celluclay comes in a variety of brands and can be found at your local craft store or online. The first thing I like to do with my Celluclay is break it up into fine pieces. When you first pull it out of the bag, it is quite clumpy, and the best way that I have found to break it up is by using my hands. Here's a close-up of what the clay looks like when it comes out of the bag. Now once you've gotten it all broken up, it should look something like this. It's my personal preference, but once I've gotten it to this stage, I like to add some fine wool fibers. I find that adding the wool fibers to my clay produces a better quality finish and a more durable finished product. Let me know down in the comments if you have any tips or tricks for working with clay. To add the wool fiber to the clay, I cut it into tiny 1/4 inch pieces and then I blend it in. This is how it looks once you've gotten it all blended in. After blending it with my hands, the next thing I like to do is make the mixture finer by blending it with my food processor. As you can see, it gets kind of messy. I start off by blending it at a lower speed. And then I check the consistency to make sure it's light and fluffy. If I'm happy with the consistency, I will move on to the next step, which is adding water. I like to use warm water because I feel it helps me to more easily achieve the right consistency in my clay. Alright, now it's time to add the water. I don't think that there is a perfect recipe for paper mache clay. It just really depends on what you're working on. For example, if I'm working on sculpting faces, I will need a thicker, stickier clay, so I'll add less water. If I'm doing finishing work, I like to use a smaller amount of runnier clay to fill in any of the voids left by the drying process. Today I will be making the thicker and stickier clay. When you are making clay in small batches like this, it can be kind of tough. You have to keep scraping the sides and pushing the clay mixture towards the blades. When I'm making my thicker clay, I know it's getting close to the right consistency when the clay starts to ball up, just like this. And this is what it looks like when it comes out of the food processor. Now that we've finished with that, it's time to scrape it out of the food processor and place it into an airtight container. This is also a very messy part of the process. Okay, now that we've finished blending up all of our clay, it's time to move on to the second part of this process, using my pre-made cupcake bases. Let's get started on the face. The first thing I like to do is draw out a map of where the eyes, nose, and mouth are going to be placed. I'm not looking for exact symmetry here, as I prefer my faces to be slightly off-kilter. It's what gives my little critters their character. The type of critter I'm working on today is a vampire bat. I'm making his smile nice and wide so I have room to place in some vampire teeth. Before I get started on the sculpting, let me show you some of the tools I like to use. I have two plastic modeling tools, one with a rounded edge and the other has a more squared off edge. The third is a ball sculpting tool. Let's get sculpting. I usually like to start off with the eyes, as I feel it gives me a great place to anchor the cheeks. To sculpt the eyes, I like to lay down a large piece of clay, push it up into the shape that I like, and then smooth it into place. The ball sculpting tool is one of my favorite tools that I use for rounding out the eyes. When you get a chance, head on down to the comments and let me know some of your sculpting techniques. Once I get the eyes the way I like them, I start working on the cheeks and mouth, placing large lumps of clay down and smoothing them into place. Alright, it's time to add a place to sink those vampire teeth into. To accomplish this, I use my sculpting tool to push up a small area in the cheeks, big enough to fit each tooth. I'll show you how I do this in part 2 of this mini-series. Now that I've finished sculpting the mouth and cheeks, it's time to add a nose. And smooth it into place. Now it's time to add some finishing details and smooth out all of those rough edges. The last detail I'll be adding to this face is the chin. I'll do it the same way that I did the eyes and the cheeks by adding a large lump of clay and then smoothing it into place. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more paper clay videos, please click subscribe and you'll get notified every time I upload a new video. Don't forget to check back with me because I will be uploading part 2 of this mini-series next week.